The afternoon heat in Port Harcourt was merciless, the kind that made the air feel like it was being poured straight from an oven. The wide asphalt of Orowa Market shimmered, and every car bonnet looked hot enough to fry an egg. Vendors fanned themselves with scraps of cardboard while shouting prices to half-interested customers, dodging impatient kiki riders, and honking minibuses. Along the dusty edge of the road, Nkechi moved slowly, balancing a blue basin of sachet water on her head. She was in her late 20s, heavily pregnant, and every step sent a dull ache up her swollen feet. Sweat trickled down her back, soaking the faded wrapper around her waist. Her midwife, Mama Ife, had warned her only last week, "Nkechi, your time is near. You need to rest. If you overwork yourself, you'll land in trouble." But rest didn't pay rent. Rest didn't buy baby clothes. Rest didn't fill an empty stomach. And today, Nkechi needed every naira she could make. She rubbed her belly with one hand as she walked, murmuring under her breath, "Please, not yet. Stay a little longer for Mama. Let me finish selling." The bridal fabric lane was her favorite spot to hawk, a stretch lined with shops displaying shimmering wedding gowns, sequined lace, and colorful head ties. Brides-to-be and their friends always seemed thirsty after a round of bargaining, and on good days, her basin would be empty before noon. But today, the sun was unforgiving. Halfway down the lane, a sharp pain shot through her lower back, wrapping around her waist like a rope pulled tight. Nkechi froze, bending slightly forward and grabbing her belly. The pain eased after a few seconds, and she straightened, telling herself it was nothing. She hadn't gone more than 5 steps before the pain returned, sharper this time, making her knees almost buckle. She staggered toward the nearest parked car, a shiny black SUV, and placed her hand gently on the door for support. That was when a voice, cold and sharp, sliced through the market noise. "You filthy thing! How dare you touch my car?" Nkechi turned her head slowly. A tall, light-skinned woman, in a fitted designer gown, stood a few steps away, gold jewelry glinting in the sun. Her makeup was flawless despite the heat, and she clutched a handbag that looked like it could pay Nkechi's rent for a year. "I'm sorry, madam," Nkechi said quickly. "I just had a sharp pain. I didn't mean—" "Shut up!" the woman snapped, stepping closer. "Do you know how much this car costs? Use that your dirty water and wash where you touched before I lose my temper." "Madam, please," Nkechi pleaded, still bent slightly. "If I use this water, I will run at a loss. I'm very pregnant." The woman didn't let her finish. Slap! The force knocked Nkechi sideways onto the hot pavement. Pain exploded in her belly, and suddenly she felt a warm gush between her legs. Asterisk, welcome to Moonlit Stories, where moonlight meets myth. Love timeless tales? Then hit like, subscribe, and join the circle. Every story begins with you. "My water has broken," she gasped. "Please help me." But the woman only sneered. "Next time, know your place." What neither of them realized was that someone powerful had been watching from across the street, and nothing that happened next would ever be the same again. From across the road, Tobias Okoro had been frozen in place, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a folder. He'd come to Orowa Market for a quick meeting with a fabric merchant, but the scene unfolding in front of him made him forget why he was even there. He had seen everything. The pregnant hawker leaning on the SUV, the slap, the insult, the shameless way the woman had walked off as if she hadn't just assaulted someone in broad daylight. And that woman, that was Vera Okoro, the woman Tobias was supposed to marry in 3 weeks. The same Vera he had described to friends as gentle, kind, and refined. The words now felt like a bitter joke in his mouth. Tobias's jaw clenched. He could still hear her voice. Filthy thing. He could still see the look on the hawker's face when she fell, part pain, part disbelief. Without thinking, he crossed the road. The market noise seemed to fade as he approached the woman lying on the pavement, clutching her belly. "Madam," he said urgently, kneeling beside her, "you need to get to a hospital now." Nkechi blinked up at him, confused by his tone and his neatly pressed shirt. "Sir, No time," he cut in. Turning his head, he called to his driver, Femi, who had been waiting in their gray Toyota Land Cruiser. "Help me lift her." Carefully, Femi rushed over, and together they helped Nkechi to her feet. She winced but didn't resist as they guided her into the back seat. The cold blast from the car's air conditioner made her gasp slightly, the sudden relief against the scorching air outside almost dizzying. Tobias slid in beside her, while Femi started the engine. "St. Mary's Hospital," Tobias ordered. As the car joined the traffic, Tobias glanced at Nkechi. Her breathing was uneven, one hand gripping her belly, the other clutching the seat for balance. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "You'll be fine. I'll make sure of it." She didn't reply. She still had no idea who he was or that the same man helping her was engaged to the woman who had just slapped her to the ground. The drive through Port Harcourt's congested roads felt longer than it was. Tobias kept one eye on her, the other on the road ahead. He didn't care that he was missing his meeting. The urgency in his chest was stronger than any business deal. At St. Mary's, 2 nurses ran forward with a wheelchair the moment they saw her condition. "She's in labor," Tobias said quickly. "Please hurry." They wheeled her into the maternity ward. A doctor in green scrubs, Dr. Ease, approached, scanning Nkechi's vitals. "She's exhausted and malnourished," he said gravely. "The baby's heartbeat is weak. We need to operate now or we could lose both." "Do it," Tobias said without hesitation. Nkechi's eyes widened, but she nodded faintly. As they wheeled her into surgery, Tobias stood alone in the cold hospital corridor, his heart pounding, and the image of Vera slapping this woman burning deeper into his mind. The ticking wall clock in St. Mary's Hospital seemed louder than usual. Tobias Okoro sat on one of the hard plastic chairs, elbows on his knees, staring at the double doors of the operating theater. He had no idea why his chest felt so tight. This woman was a stranger. He didn't even know her name. Yet the thought of losing her, or the child she carried, felt wrong on a level he couldn't explain. He kept seeing flashes of the market, her falling to the ground, clutching her belly, Vera's sharp voice, the look on the faces of the bystanders who did nothing. An hour crawled by. Then the theater doors swung open and Dr. E stepped out, pulling off his gloves. "How is she?" Tobias asked immediately, rising to his feet. The doctor's face softened. "Congratulations. She delivered a healthy baby boy. She's weak, but with proper care and rest, she should recover well. The child is underweight, but nothing serious." Relief washed over Tobias, so fast he had to exhale slowly just to steady himself. "Thank you, doctor. Please, give her everything she needs. Food, medicine, anything. I'll handle the bills." Within the hour, the hospital accountant had his payment in full, plus extra for any additional needs. When Tobias finally walked into the private ward, Nkechi was sitting propped against a pillow, a small white bundle in her arms. The faint smell of talcum powder and warm milk hung in the air. She looked up at him, and despite her pale face, a soft smile lit her features. "Good afternoon, sir," she said quietly. "You saved my life and my baby's. We are grateful." Tobias shook his head. "I only did what anyone should do." Nkechi looked down at the baby, then back at him. "I want to name him after you," she said. "From today, his name will be Tobias." For a moment, Tobias just stared at her, something twisting in his chest. "I'm honored," he replied at last, his voice low. From that day, he visited the hospital daily. Every morning he brought baby formula, diapers, fresh fruit, and small treats for Nkechi. When she was discharged a week later, he insisted on taking her home himself. But home turned out to be a single, dimly lit room in a crumbling building, with cracked walls and a rusty window frame. Tobias looked around and shook his head. "You can't stay here with a newborn," he said firmly. "Sir, we will manage," Nkechi protested. "You've done enough." But Tobias was already dialing a number. By evening, he had secured a small, clean apartment for her in a quieter part of town, paid 2 years' rent up front, and furnished it with the basics. As she stood in the doorway of the new home, tears glistening in her eyes, Nkechi whispered, "This is too much." "Rest," Tobias said simply. "Doctor's orders." What neither of them knew was that this act of kindness would set in motion a chain of events that would change all their lives and destroy one engagement beyond repair. Vera Okoro was quick to notice changes in Tobias Okoro. Her usually attentive fiancé had grown quieter, sometimes distracted during their dinners, his phone calls ending abruptly when she walked into the room. At first, She told herself it was stress from work. But after a week of watching him come home later than usual, and with a faint smell of talcum powder clinging to his shirt, her suspicions grew sharper. One Thursday morning, after Tobias left for the office, Vera made up her mind. She would follow him. She parked her car 2 vehicles behind his and kept her sunglasses on, watching as he pulled into a large supermarket. Through the glass doors, she saw him pushing a trolley, picking up packs of baby diapers, tins of infant formula, wipes, and even a small stuffed teddy bear. Her stomach tightened. She pulled out her phone and began recording from the car window. "So, you do have another family," she muttered. When Tobias left the store, Vera followed him through the busy Port Harcourt streets until he stopped in front of a modest cream-painted apartment block. He carried the shopping bags inside. 10 minutes later, he emerged empty-handed and drove off. Vera waited until she was certain he was gone before marching to the door he had entered. She knocked sharply. Inside, Nkechi had been folding baby Tobias's tiny clothes. When she opened the door and saw Vera, she froze. "Good afternoon, Ma," Nkechi said cautiously. Vera's lips curled into a smirk. "Help your generation. First my car, now my fiancé." Before Nkechi could answer, the sound of a baby crying drifted from inside. Vera's eyes snapped toward the noise, and she pushed past Nkechi into the small living room. "Who is the father of this child? Is it Tobias?" Nkechi shook her head quickly. "No, madam." The slap came fast and hard, making Nkechi stumble backward. Vera grabbed her arm, voice rising. "I will destroy you and this child. You don't know me." The shouting drew neighbors from their rooms. Mama Toby from next door stepped between them, hands raised. "Madam, this is wrong. Leave her alone. Stay out of this." Vera barked, trying to push past. But 2 more neighbors stepped in, pulling her toward the door. Finally, they shoved Vera outside. "You don't know what she's doing," Vera shouted, her voice echoing in the compound. "I'll be back." The door closed firmly, and Nkechi sank into the nearest chair, clutching her wailing baby. Her hands shook as she tried to calm him, her mind racing to understand why this strange, furious woman seemed determined to destroy her. She didn't yet know that her quiet protector, Tobias, and this raging stranger were engaged, or that this ugly encounter was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. 2 days after the confrontation, the midday sun set over the compound like a curse. Nkechi had just finished washing baby Tobias's tiny shirts and hung them on the rope outside when the screech of tires made her freeze. A sleek black sedan pulled up in front of the gate. Vera and Okoro stepped out in a fitted mustard-yellow gown, sunglasses perched high on her head like a crown. She wasn't alone. 4 bulky men followed behind her, the kind whose muscles came from years of carrying cement blocks and settling street disputes with their fists. "Auntie Nkechi," a neighbor whispered urgently from a doorway. "E be like Waladon land." The men didn't greet anyone. They walked straight to Nkechi's room, shoved the door open, and began dragging her things out. The baby's cot scraped against the floor, a small mattress was tossed into the sun, and a bag of diapers rolled into the dust. "Please!" Nkechi cried, clutching her baby. "Be careful, there's a child here." Vera's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "This house was rented by my fiancé. I no longer want to see you here. Pack your things and disappear before I do something worse." The compound's crowd gasped. An older woman muttered under her breath, "Shame no day this one face." Nkechi's lips trembled. She wanted to explain that she had no idea who Vera's fiancé was until recently, but the words stuck in her throat. All she could do was hold her crying child and watch her possessions land in the dirt. One of the men kicked her cooking pot aside, and it clanged against the pavement. The baby's feeding bottle hit the ground and cracked. Nkechi's eyes filled with tears, but she bit her lip, determined not to cry in front of Vera. When they were done, Vera dusted her hands dramatically, gave Nkechi one last cold stare, and turned to leave. "This is your final warning. If I see you anywhere near him, you'll regret it." The car door slammed, the engine roared, and within seconds, they were gone, leaving behind a scene that looked like a storm had passed through. That evening, Nkechi sat under the shade of a tree with her scattered belongings piled around her. Her baby had finally fallen asleep, his tiny head resting against her shoulder. The heat clung to her skin, and dust from passing motorcycles coated her wrapper. A neighbor eventually sat beside her and spoke in a low voice. Do you even know who that woman's fiancé is? Nkechi shook her head. It's the same man who paid for this place. The man who brought you here from the hospital. The words landed like a stone in her chest. Tobias. The knowledge was both comforting and frightening. Comforting because she understood his kindness now, frightening because it meant Vera's rage might be far from over. Somewhere in the city, Tobias had no idea that the home he'd arranged for Nkechi had been torn from her, and that the real war had just begun. By Thursday afternoon, Tobias Okoro was parking his SUV outside the cream-painted apartment block. He balanced 2 shopping bags in one hand, baby formula, diapers, fresh fruit, and knocked on Nkechi's door expecting to hear her voice. Silence. He knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. From the next room, Mama Toby poked her head out, pity written all over her face. Olga, she no day. Tobias frowned. What do you mean? The older woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. Your wife came 2 days ago. She say the girl day used juju hold you. She beat her, beat the baby too. Then she bring boys come throw her things outside. We never see her since. Tobias froze, the words sinking in like cold steel. Your wife. He exhaled slowly, his voice tight. She's not my wife. The neighbor only shrugged, as if the detail made no difference. That evening, Tobias walked into his living room, his jaw locked. Vera and Okoro sat on the sofa, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. He stood in front of her. A few months ago, I watched you slap a pregnant woman in the middle of the market. You dragged her on the ground, called her names, and left her to suffer. That same woman gave birth in the hospital while you went on with your day. And I helped her, because it was the right thing to do. Vera's eyes flicked up, cautious. Tobias, please. He cut her off, his voice cold. Today I find out you went to her home, assaulted her again, harmed her baby, and threw her into the street. Is that the kind of woman I'm supposed to marry? Her mouth opened and closed. I thought she was your side chick. I was jealous. I didn't know. That she's better than you? Tobias's tone was razor sharp. Because she is. 10 times better. I will not marry you, Vera. This is over. Pack your things and leave my house tonight. Her eyes widened. Tobias, please, think about what people will say. Our wedding invitations are all ready. I don't care, he said flatly. You showed me who you really are, and I believe you. When she tried to reach for his arm, he stepped back. Turning toward the front gate, he called to his security man. Bode, help her pack. Bar her entry after tonight. Vera's voice cracked. You'll regret this. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. I need you to find someone, he told the private investigator on the other end. Her name is Nkechi. She has a baby boy named Tobias. Last known address, Orowarukwo. Find her now. 1 week later, the call came just after dawn. Sir, we found her. She's staying in a church compound in Remoigbo. Tobias was already dressed before the phone hit the table. He didn't know what he would say when he saw her, only that he wouldn't let her go through this alone ever again. The drive to Remoigbo felt longer than usual. Every traffic light, every pothole, every slow-moving taxi was an irritation. By the time Tobias Okoro turned into the narrow street where the small white-painted church stood, his grip on the steering wheel had left his knuckles pale. He parked under a mango tree and scanned the compound. Then he saw her. Nkechi sat under a large almond tree at the side of the building, her baby cradled in her lap. She looked thinner, her wrapper faded from repeated washing, her slippers worn. The baby, tiny Tobias, slept with his mouth slightly open, one small fist resting against her chest. When she looked up and spotted him, surprise flashed in her eyes, followed by hesitation. Tobias! He approached slowly, as if afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. Nkechi, why didn't you answer my calls? She looked away, her voice tight. Your woman came accusing me. She threw me out. I didn't want more trouble. I've been staying here with one of the church members. She's not my woman, he said firmly. Not anymore. I broke off the engagement. Nkechi's brows lifted slightly. Because of me? Because of her, he corrected. Because she showed me who she is. His tone softened. Let me get you a safe place to stay. She shook her head. No. I can manage. He gave a faint, sad smile. Then at least come and work for me. I need a housekeeper. Her lips pressed into a thin line. A maid! Yes, he said, with a hint of challenge in his voice. Safer than you wandering from house to house. And I'll pay you well. Silence hung between them. The baby stirred, letting out a small whimper, and she gently rocked him back to sleep. Finally, she sighed. Only for a while. Tobias's smile was genuine this time. Deal. That afternoon, they drove to his home. The tall black gates swung open, revealing a driveway lined with hibiscus bushes and trimmed hedges. Nkechi's eyes widened. This place is something else, she murmured. Inside, 2 uniformed maids greeted them politely. Nkechi glanced at Tobias, half smirking. So you already have maids. Why did you need me? He gave an innocent shrug. I had to say whatever would make you agree to come. She shook her head, amused despite herself. The first morning in the mansion, Tobias found her in the kitchen, tying her scarf as she bent over the sink. What are you doing? He asked. Good morning, sir. I'm helping with the dishes, she replied simply. I have people to do that, he reminded her. It doesn't matter. I'm here, I should contribute. It was the same when he caught her outside on the 3rd morning, washing his black SUV with more foam than a car wash. He sighed, but his lips curved into a small smile as he walked away. For the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel so empty. In the weeks that followed, the Okoro mansion began to change. It wasn't just that Nkechi kept the place spotless, or that the smell of fresh akara and fried plantain sometimes drifted from the kitchen. It was the sound, soft baby giggles, quiet humming as she rocked baby Tobias, the gentle creak of a feeding chair late at night. Tobias Okoro found himself coming home earlier than he had in years. At first, he told himself it was to check that she was settling in. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Almost every evening, Nkechi would meet him at the door with the baby in her arms. Without fail, the little boy would break into a gummy smile and stretch out his tiny hands, babbling "Dada" before Tobias had even set down his briefcase. One Thursday afternoon, Tobias cleared his schedule so he could take them both for the child's immunization appointment. At the clinic, a nurse smiled warmly at Nkechi. Your husband is a very caring man, she said as she marked the vaccination card. Nkechi gave a polite smile. Thank you, but he's my boss. The nurse chuckled knowingly. Boss or not, it's clear he likes you and your son very much. Nkechi didn't answer. She only glanced at Tobias, who was busy making the baby laugh with exaggerated faces. As the months passed, their routines became unspoken agreements. Tobias handled errands that needed a car, Nkechi handled the home. She cooked his favorite meals, not because he asked, but because she quietly noticed what he enjoyed. He, in turn, stocked the pantry with her preferred brands of spices and always slipped in an extra pack of baby cereal without her asking. One evening, after baby Tobias had fallen asleep, Nkechi knocked on the door of Tobias's home office. Come in, he called, still flipping through a file. She stepped inside, fingers nervously twisting the edge of her scarf. Good evening, sir. I've been meaning to tell you something. Tobias set his pen down. What's on your mind? I've been here for months now. You've done so much for me. But Tobias Jr. is almost 1. I think it's time for me to move out. You're a single man. People will talk if another woman lives here with you. For a moment, Tobias didn't speak. His eyes searched hers, but her expression was calm, resolute. Is someone pressuring you? She shook her head. No. It's just the right thing to do. He leaned back slowly. If that's what you want, I won't stop you. That night, after she went to bed, Tobias sat in the darkened living room far longer than usual. He didn't want to admit it, but the thought of her absence left a hollow space in his chest. The mansion had been quiet before. He hadn't realized how much he hated that silence, until he knew it was coming back. The day Nkechi moved out of the Okoro mansion, the house seemed to lose its heartbeat. Tobias Okoro had tried to play it cool that morning, carrying her bags to the car himself and helping her strap baby Tobias into his seat. She thanked him for everything, promised to keep in touch, and reminded him, again, that it was better this way. He forced a smile, but the moment her taxi pulled away, it felt like someone had switched off all the lights, even though the sun was still shining. That night, Tobias walked past the nursery out of habit. The small crib was neatly made, untouched, the colorful mobile hanging silently above it. He stood at the doorway longer than he cared to admit, his chest tight. The next few days dragged. He stayed longer at the office, sometimes checking into hotels rather than going home. On the rare evenings he returned, the house felt like a museum, quiet, immaculate, and utterly lifeless. When he visited Nkechi's new apartment for the first time, the baby squealed and reached for him instantly. But as soon as it was time to leave, little Tobias clung to his shirt, wailing "Dada," until Tobias had to gently hand him back. Each time, it cut a little deeper. 2 weeks later, he found himself standing at her door again, his usual self-control nowhere in sight. Nkechi opened the door, surprised to see him at that hour. "Tobias, is everything all right?" "No," he said plainly. She frowned. "What happened?" He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "I like you, Nkechi. I can't pretend anymore. Since you left, I've been miserable. I want you back. I want Tobias back." Her eyes widened. "Sir, please don't say that. You've done so much for us already. You should marry someone of your level. Someone your family will accept." "Good Samaritan, is that all I am to you?" he asked quietly. "That's not what I mean," she said quickly. "You're my friend, my best friend even. But it would be selfish to want you for myself when I know the kind of resistance we'd face." "If you don't love me, I'll go," he said, his voice low. "But if you do, please don't push me away because of what people will say." She didn't answer immediately. The baby stirred in his cot, breaking the silence. Tobias took a slow breath. "Think about it," he murmured, then left before she could respond. That night, Nkechi lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She told herself it was impossible, but her heart refused to believe it. Somewhere in the city, Tobias sat in his car, parked outside his own gate, staring into the dark, and wondering how long he could stand being without them. 2 weeks after that late-night confession, Nkechi finally gave Tobias her answer. They sat on a park bench under the shade of an almond tree, baby Tobias playing with a rattle on her lap. She avoided his eyes at first, but when she finally looked up, hers were steady. "I do care for you," she said softly, "but I don't want to be humiliated or thrown out like I was before." Tobias nodded slowly. "Then we'll do this on our terms. No secrets. If anyone wants to object, they can say it to my face." She hesitated, then gave the faintest smile. "All right, but I'm not moving back into that mansion unless we're married." Within days, Tobias told his parents. It was like tossing petrol into an open flame. His mother, Mrs. Felicia Okoro, practically leapt from her chair. "Never. You can never marry her. She's older than you, a single mother, and she has baggage." His father, Mr. Okoro, stayed silent at first, flipping the pages of his newspaper as though the storm brewing in the living room wasn't happening right in front of him. Within a week, the so-called Council of Elders was convened. Uncle Damien, Auntie Rose, Auntie Grace, and Uncle Francis. The air in the Okoro sitting room was thick with judgment. Uncle Damien was first. "Tobias, listen to your mother. There are fresh, young girls from good families." Tobias leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Uncle, when you married Auntie, didn't she have more money than you? Didn't people talk? And look, you've been happy for 25 years. Damien cleared his throat and glanced away. Tobias turned to Auntie Grace. "Auntie, you told me yourself you were a single mother before you met Uncle Francis. Did that stop him from marrying you? Did that stop you from having a good life?" The room went quiet enough to hear the clock ticking. Auntie Rose tried to change the subject, but Tobias didn't let her. "What matters is character. Nkechi is a good woman. If you force me to choose between her and family approval, you may not like my choice." Finally, Uncle Francis spoke up. "Brother, let the boy marry who he wants. This generation will just do it behind your back if you push too hard." Mr. Okoro gave a small nod, but Mrs. Okoro's face was tight as a drum. "I will not pretend I'm happy about this," she said coldly. Days later, Tobias arrived at his parents' house with Nkechi and the baby. They wore matching sky-blue native attire. The little boy giggled in Mr. Okoro's arms, calling him Papa, after only a few minutes. Mrs. Okoro, however, barely managed a stiff greeting. She didn't touch the baby, didn't meet Nkechi's eyes. But Tobias noticed something. For the first time, no one in the room dared say a word against them. The first battle had been won, even if the war was far from over. 3 months later, despite the tension that still lingered, Tobias, Okoro, and Nkechi stood before the altar of St. Michael's Catholic Church. There were no celebrity guests, no loud music blaring from rented speakers, no exotic floral arches, just close friends, some family, and vows spoken with steady voices. Nkechi wore a simple wedding gown with a neatly placed veil, and baby Tobias, now walking with tiny, unsteady steps, toddled around in a miniature tuxedo. Tobias himself looked almost relieved in his cream tuxedo, as if this moment had been too long in coming. Mrs. Felicia Okoro sat stiffly through the service, her lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Chike Okoro, on the other hand, clapped heartily when the priest declared them husband and wife. Back at the mansion, Nkechi moved into what was now officially her home. Within weeks, Tobias presented her with a set of keys, not to a car, but to a bakery in GRA. "This is yours," he said simply. "You've been hustling your whole life. Now it's time you built something with your name on it." Nkechi threw herself into the business. She managed staff, experimented with recipes, and soon her bread was on the shelves of supermarkets, school canteens, and church bazaars. The women who once whispered about that hawker now called her Madame Nkechi Bread Queen. Even in the glow of her growing success, the shadow of her past remained. Vera had disappeared from their lives, but rumors sometimes drifted back, whispers of her failed business deals and a short-lived engagement to another wealthy man. Nkechi never spoke of her. 1 year into their marriage, Nkechi went into labor again, this time with twins. The entire Okoro household was thrown into joyful chaos. When the news came that she had delivered 2 healthy boys, the transformation in Mrs. Felicia Okoro was instant. "My wife! Well done!" she said, her voice thick with genuine joy. She danced right there in the ward, gilly bouncing, and presented Nkechi with gifts, jewelry, clothes, and even a brand-new car. She carried each baby in turn, kissing their foreheads, then scooped up little Tobias, hugging him for the first time without stiffness. "Come here, my first grandbaby," she said warmly. From that moment, the frost between her and Nkechi began to thaw. Months later, the mansion no longer echoed with silence. Instead, it was filled with the laughter of 3 children, the smell of freshly baked bread from Nkechi's expanding chain of bakeries, and the hum of a family that had fought to exist. Sometimes, when she sat at the head of the long dining table, Tobias beside her, children around her, Nkechi would remember the day she was slapped in a crowded market for leaning on the wrong car. The heat, the shame, the helplessness. Now, she was Mrs. Nkechi Okoro, wife, mother of 3, respected businesswoman, and mistress of the very house she had once entered as a temporary maid. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that no matter what came next, she would never be powerless again.